Okay, so let's look at some rules for naming tropical storms. Some of these you probably know, and some of them you may not know. So, for instance, did you know that each ocean basin has its own set of names? Makes sense, right? But did you know that, like the hurricanes affecting North America, of course, we have hurricanes, we just talked a little bit ago, that start out as easterly waves off the west coast of Africa and kind of head this way in the Atlantic Ocean basin. And then we also have another set of hurricanes kind of affecting, coming up from the Gulf or coming up from kind of the South Pacific. And they have two different sets of names. Oh, and they're alternating now male and female names. Now, did you know that historically, and I don't know what year this changed, but they used to be all female names? Maybe you're not old enough to know that. I remember that. Did you know, you probably imagined, that of the 26 letters in the alphabet, there are some letters that don't lend themselves to coming up with proper names. So these letters Q, U, X, Y, and Z are not included in the list of 26 letters. Did you know that? Did you know then of the remaining letters of the alphabet that we can use, there's 21 letters. If we run out of letters, we go ahead and switch gears into the Greek letters. I think that's kind of funny. And I didn't know this either. Did you know that actually there are 6 lists of names, of 21 names, alternating female, male, and that we recycle those every 6 years. I'm going to show you the list here in a minute. Now, I mentioned earlier on a slide that a name can be retired. Actually, it's probably the next one, isn't it? A name can be retired, like, for instance, for the letter K, we had the female name Katrina, and that was in the list, ongoing, would be recycled every 6 years. But now that name has been retired and been replaced with another female name that starts with the letter K. Makes sense. So here we go. I'm going to show you the 6 lists. So back in 2008, these were the A through W names that were used, alternating male, female. So you might go see if your name's there. This is list B. So actually, to me, we could call this list A, list B. Okay, see if your name's there. Okay, the next list actually was used in 2010. Here we go. The next list, 2011. Let's see, the next list, 2012 actually. So that would be this year, right? So this is the list that we're going to use this year. And remember that the storm does not need to become a hurricane in order to get a name. It simply needs to become a tropical storm. Okay, and the last list, F. So yeah, it's kind of fun to see if your name's on there. So then in 2014, what will we use? Well, we'll use this list, won't we? Does that make sense? And 2015, we'll use this list. Now, available on the internet is a list of, for instance, these are the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico hurricanes, the Caribbean Sea. There is a list for the Pacific Ocean on the internet. All right. So how do we categorize those things? Well, I mentioned that they are categorized Cat 1 through Cat 5. And the scale we use, remember we use the enhanced Fujita scale for tornadoes. We use the Saffir-Simpson scale for hurricanes, for tropical cyclones. Now, one of the big differences between categorizing a hurricane versus categorizing a tornado is hurricanes, or whatever stage they're at, if it's a tropical storm or a tropical depression or tropical disturbance, it's categorized as the system is alive or active. So Cat 1 is the least intense, Cat 5 is the most intense. And the two things that we can look at to categorize I guess this is just one thing in particular kind of shown up here. If we kind of focus on, you're going to see a list, Cat 1 through Cat 5. Specifically, they are categorized on their wind speed. And again, we use real live data at the time that the hurricane is, or the tropical storm or tropical disturbance or depression. We catch those wind speeds real time, but they correlate well to the central low pressure, and they also correlate well to something we call storm surge. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. So at the time of 2005, now I didn't chase this down to update it to 2012 because that was 7 years ago, but there were only 3 Category 5 and 16 Category 4 hurricanes that had ever hit the United States. So how do we measure the winds then? Well, we can go ahead and use an airplane to drop these. They're kind of like, do you remember the weather balloons could carry up devices, or they do carry up twice a day. Our weather balloons ascend and carry up these things called Raman sounds that can actually give us data with regard to wind speed and wind direction. Well, airplanes can drop these things called drop wind sounds into the hurricane to measure wind speed. When I think of aircraft reconnaissance, I always think of, again, the movie The Day After Tomorrow. Early on in the movie, they're not quite sure what's going on with this odd weather system, so I think they purposefully send some aircraft out there to check it out with dire consequences. But we do have aircraft, and I have a picture of one coming up, that actually that's what they do, is to go ahead and National Weather Service goes ahead and implores them to get information about the building weather system. So this is a drop wind sound where basically from maybe the same plane that's getting reconnaissance information, we can go ahead and drop these down into the system to see the wind speed and wind direction. So categorizing them, I mentioned that we categorize them on wind speed, but that their low pressure and their storm surge actually correlate well too. So our Category 1 is the weakest of the hurricanes or tropical cyclones, and they need to have a minimum wind speed of 119 miles or kilometers per hour, I was going to say, 119 kilometers per hour in order to be classified, upgraded from a tropical storm to a hurricane. At the other end of the spectrum, basically in order to be a Category 5 hurricane or tropical cyclone, it needs to be wind speeds of greater than 250 kilometers per hour. Isn't that crazy? So then we have the categories 2 through 4 kind of in between. Now I saved this, and I'm going to, again, kind of talk more about this later. But what storm surge is basically as the tropical cyclone, as the hurricane hits landfall, it kind of brushes a big old wall of water up onto the land. And that's what we call storm surge. So, for instance, what this means, and if you kind of follow the saga of Hurricane Katrina, storm surge was a player in kind of the disaster that unfolded there. And I think what did the statistics on that was it must have been a Category 4 hurricane, Hurricane Katrina. But if you had a Category 5 hurricane, basically what you're looking at is a wall of water with your storm surge that's in excess of 5 feet of water. So I thought I would just kind of bring this in. This is our Saffir-Simpson scale for categorizing hurricanes. And I want to kind of compare that with our enhanced Fujita scale, just for kicks, specifically wind speed. And I don't know if it strikes you or not, but for instance, a Category 4 hurricane, Category 4 tropical cyclone, has wind speeds of 210 to 250 kilometers per hour. And notice that actually that is basically encompassed in our tornadoes that we categorize as an EF3 tornado, a Category 4 hurricane. I just thought it was